The sun set over the ruined planet of Illyria, casting long shadows over the once thriving city. Now the streets were empty, with only the sounds of distant explosions and the hum of alien ships hovering above. The invaders had come months ago, wiping out whole civilizations in their relentless pursuit of conquest. But there was one thing the invaders had not counted on: the resilience of the Illyrians. The inhabitants had fought back, but the battle was lost, and now the survivors were scattered, hiding in the rubble. Amid the ruins, a lone human soldier, John Carter, walked cautiously through the streets. His boots made soft thuds against the cracked pavement as he surveyed the damage. His mission was clear: rescue the survivors. He had seen enough destruction in his time as a soldier to harden his heart. But there was something about Illyria that felt different. The planet had once been a place of great beauty, full of life and color. Now it was a shell of its former self. John was used to this. He had been on countless rescue missions across different planets. But this one felt heavier. The Illyrians were a peaceful species, known for their empathy and advanced technology. To see them brought to their knees was a painful reminder of the harsh realities of war. As he moved deeper into the city, he saw signs of life: flickering lights in abandoned buildings, shadows moving in the distance. He wasn't alone. Suddenly, a small figure caught his eye. Behind a pile of rubble, he saw a young girl crouched down, her knees pulled to her chest. Her alien features were unmistakable: large, expressive eyes, a smooth, slightly iridescent skin that shimmered under the fading light. But it was the sadness in her eyes that struck him the most. She was alone. John's heart skipped a beat. The girl was an Illyrian, but her appearance was far from the vibrant creatures he had read about. Her once beautiful long hair was tangled and her clothes were torn. She didn't move when John approached. She was staring into the distance, lost in thought, as if she had forgotten the world around her. He crouched down in front of her, his voice gentle. "Hey there, are you all right?" The girl didn't answer. She didn't even look up. John hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to help. The Illyrians were known for their strong sense of empathy, but this girl seemed to have lost all of that. She looked like she had given up, her spirit crushed by the loss of her family, her home, and everything she had ever known. John had seen this kind of trauma before, but something about her struck him harder than anything he had experienced. He sat down beside her, giving her the space she needed, but making sure she knew he was there. For a long time they sat in silence, the distant explosions echoing in the background. John had no idea what to say. What could he say to a child who had seen everything she loved destroyed? His mind raced, but nothing seemed right. Finally the girl spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "They're all gone, I'm alone." John's chest tightened at her words. He couldn't imagine the pain she was feeling. The weight of her loss was palpable, and he knew he had to do something. He couldn't leave her here, not like this. She needed help, and he was the only one who could offer it. "I'm not going to leave you," John said softly, his voice full of determination. "I promise I'll help you. You're not alone anymore." The girl finally looked at him, her eyes full of skepticism. She had heard promises before, but they had always been broken. But something in John's gaze made her pause. Maybe he meant it. Maybe he was telling the truth. She nodded slowly, her expression still distant. "Where will I go?" John stood up and extended his hand. "Come with me. I'm taking you to Earth. There, you'll be safe." For a moment, the girl didn't move. She just stared at his hand, unsure. But then, as if the weight of her decision finally hit her, she took it. Her small hand felt fragile in his. John helped her up, and together they began walking toward the nearest transport shuttle. They boarded the shuttle and lifted off from Illyria. John couldn't help but feel a sense of responsibility for the little girl beside him. He had made a promise and he intended to keep it. But he knew that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, and taking an Illyrian child to Earth would bring its own set of challenges. He would have to fight, for her safety, and he would have to protect her from the very forces that had destroyed her world. The shuttle's engines hummed softly as they traveled through the void of space. John watched the stars outside the window, deep in thought. He had seen the best and worst of humanity in his time as a soldier. But there was something about this little girl that made him believe in hope again. Maybe, just maybe, he could give her the life she deserved. But what he didn't know was that their journey would change more than just the girl's life. It would change the fate of the entire galaxy. The journey to Earth was long, and Nora, the Illyrian girl, remained silent for most of it. She would sit by the window of the shuttle, staring out into the vastness of space. Her mind seemed lost in the endless stars, as if trying to find something she could hold on to. The quiet hum of the shuttle's engines was the only sound that filled the small cabin. John Carter, sitting across from her, watched her carefully. He knew that time alone would not heal her, but he hoped that being in a new place, a safer place, would at least offer her some comfort. He had seen children with similar pain, those who had lost everything. He had seen them turn cold and distant, unwilling to trust anyone. But Nora, despite her silence, hadn't turned away from him. She hadn't pushed him away like he feared she might. The shuttle eventually entered Earth's atmosphere, and the view outside shifted. The stars were replaced with the blue oceans and green lands of the planet. Nora finally looked up, her eyes wide with wonder. For the first time since John had met her, he saw a flicker of something other than sadness in her eyes. Maybe it was hope, or maybe it was just the awe of seeing something new and beautiful. But John couldn't help but smile. "This is Earth," John said softly, as if speaking to a child, even though Nora was not much younger than him. "It's a place full of life and beauty. You'll be safe here." Nora didn't respond, but her gaze remained fixed on the planet below them. She was starting to understand that she was being taken somewhere far different from Illyria, a place where the war had never touched. The shuttle landed smoothly on Earth, in a quiet military facility where John was stationed. It was a peaceful base, far from the chaos of the war. John had arranged for her to be taken there in secret, away from prying eyes. He wasn't sure how the world would react to an alien girl, but he knew he couldn't just drop her into the public eye. Not yet. John led her through the base, keeping a protective hand on her shoulder. She looked around cautiously, her large eyes taking in the new surroundings with curiosity. Everything was strange to her: human buildings, human clothing, and especially human faces. She was used to seeing people who looked like her, or at least people who shared a common history. But now, she was surrounded by humans. She didn't know if she should trust them. John could sense her fear and tried to reassure her. "It's going to be all right," he said quietly. "I'm here, and you're not alone anymore." Nora nodded, but the fear didn't leave her eyes. It was clear that the trauma of her past still weighed heavily on her. She hadn't yet learned to trust, and it would take time. John understood that. Over the next few weeks, life at the base began to settle into a routine. John kept Nora with him in his small quarters, where he did his best to make her feel comfortable. He introduced her to Earth's food, which she found strange but intriguing. He showed her how to use the simple human technology, like the tablet, where she could watch videos and learn about Earth's history and culture. He even found her a small room to call her own, filled with things that would make her feel at home: books, soft blankets, and some toys that John had bought from the base's shop. But despite his efforts, Nora remained distant. At night, she would often wake up, her eyes wide with panic, as if she were still trapped in the nightmare of Illyria. John would always be there, sitting by her side, offering comfort. He didn't have all the answers. He didn't know how to heal the pain she had endured, but he knew that he had to try. One evening, as the sun set behind the base, John took Nora outside to see the stars. He thought the open sky might give her a sense of freedom, a reminder of the endless possibilities ahead of her. They sat on the grass looking up at the constellations that filled the night sky. Nora didn't say anything, but John could feel her presence beside him, and for the first time she didn't seem so lost. "Back on Illyria," John began, his voice soft. "We didn't have these kinds of skies. The air was thick with smoke, from the fires. But here you can see everything clearly. Nora looked up at the sky, her expression still unreadable. But as she gazed at the stars, there was a hint of something more, perhaps a longing or a desire to understand what had happened. To her world, her past was a distant memory, one she couldn't forget, but it was slowly starting to fade as she adjusted to life on Earth. I know it's hard, John continued, but you're here now, you're safe, and I'm not going anywhere. Nora glanced at him, her big eyes searching his face as if trying to read him. After a long pause, she finally spoke. Will they find me? She asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. John furrowed his brow. Who? The others, she replied, her voice trembling. The ones who took everything from me. Will they come here? John's heart ached for her. He didn't know how to answer her question. The invaders who had destroyed her world were still out there, and there was always the possibility they would come looking for her. But he couldn't let her live in fear forever. No, John said firmly, his voice full of conviction. They won't find you here. I'll make sure of it. Nora didn't respond, but she nodded slowly as if she wanted to believe him. John could see that she was beginning to trust him, even if just a little. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. As the days passed, John continued to care for Nora, showing her more of Earth's beauty and teaching her how to navigate her new life. They were becoming a family, a small, but growing, bond between a human and an alien girl. And though the road ahead would not be easy, John was determined to keep his promise. He would protect her no matter what. But deep down he knew that the galaxy was still a dangerous place. The invaders had not forgotten Illyria, and they would come looking for her eventually. When that day came, John would be ready. He had no idea what would happen next, but one thing was certain: Nora was no longer alone, and with that, hope had returned to her heart. Weeks passed and life at the military base began to feel more routine. John Carter continued to care for Nora, teaching her about Earth and introducing her to the small joys of life. Though Nora was still distant, she had started to open up, bit by bit. She began to smile at the simple things: the soft rustle of trees in the wind, the laughter of children in the distance, and the feel of warm sunlight on her skin. But despite these small moments of peace, John knew that Nora was still haunted by her past. One day, while John was at the base working, Nora was left alone in her room. She had gotten used to the quiet of her new life, but there was always something missing. She felt as though she was floating through life without truly connecting to anything. There were moments when she felt like she was finally starting to heal, but those moments were brief, and the weight of her past was never far behind. That afternoon, John returned to his quarters to find Nora sitting on the floor, her legs crossed, her eyes closed. At first, he thought she was simply resting, but when he looked closer, he saw that she was holding her hands out in front of her, as if trying to touch something invisible. He didn't want to disturb her, but his curiosity got the better of him, and he slowly approached her. "Nora?" he asked gently. She didn't open her eyes, but she nodded, as if she had known he was there the whole time. "I've been practicing," she said softly. Her voice was quieter than usual, and there was a sense of calmness in it that John hadn't heard before. "I can feel things, people, their emotions." John's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Nora opened her eyes slowly and looked up at him, a faint, almost unnoticeable smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I can feel their pain, their joy, their fear. I don't know how I do it, but when I close my eyes, it's like I can see inside them, their hearts." John was taken aback by her words. He had known that the Illyrians were a highly empathetic species, but this was something more. Nora wasn't just picking up on emotions. She was connecting with them on a deep, almost spiritual level. He could see it in her eyes. This ability wasn't something she had learned. It was something that had always been inside her. "Is it overwhelming?" he asked, concerned. Nora nodded slowly. "Yes. It's like I can't escape it. Sometimes the pain is too much, but other times it's beautiful. It makes me feel connected, like I belong. John knelt beside her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. Nora, you don't have to carry this alone. I'm here. You don't have to do this on your own. Nora looked up at him, and for the first time, John saw a glimpse of something stronger in her eyes, something that resembled hope. She nodded again, but this time it wasn't just a nod of agreement. It was a nod of acceptance. Over the next few days, Nora's ability to feel others' emotions grew stronger. She began to understand the world around her in a way that most humans couldn't. She could sense when someone was sad, even if they didn't show it. She could feel when someone was afraid, even if they tried to hide it. And more surprisingly, she could feel John's emotions too. One evening, while they sat together in their small living room, Nora suddenly looked up at John with a serious expression. "You're afraid," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. John was caught off guard. Afraid? Of what? Nora's gaze didn't waver. Of losing me. John's heart skipped a beat. She was right. He had been afraid. Afraid of losing her to the pain of her past. Afraid of what might happen if the invaders ever came looking for her. Afraid of not being able to protect her when the time came. He hadn't realized just how much that fear weighed on him until Nora had pointed it out. "I don't want to lose you, Nora," he said quietly. "You've been through so much already, and I don't want to see you suffer anymore." Nora tilted her head slightly, her large eyes searching his face. "But you're not afraid of me, are you?" she asked, almost as if testing him. John smiled softly. "No, I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid of what you've already lost. What you've been through. But not you." Nora's expression softened. She had heard stories of humans fearing aliens, fearing the unknown. But John wasn't like the others. He wasn't afraid of her abilities or her differences. He accepted her for who she was, and that made all the difference. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. I think I'm starting to understand what it means to belong." The next day, something extraordinary happened. As Nora walked through the base, she noticed a group of soldiers sitting together, talking and laughing. They looked happy, carefree even. But as she passed them, she suddenly felt a wave of sadness, deep, overwhelming sorrow that came from one of the soldiers. It wasn't visible on his face, but to Nora it was impossible to miss. The soldier, a young man named Lieutenant James, had lost someone close to him, though he hadn't shared it with anyone. Nora could feel it, and without thinking, she reached out to him. As soon as she touched his arm, the soldier looked up in surprise, but before he could speak, Nora spoke softly, her voice calm and soothing. "You don't have to carry this by yourself," she said, her voice full of compassion. "It's okay to feel." The soldier looked at her, stunned by the sudden connection. For a moment he said nothing, but then slowly, tears began to form in his eyes. He had never told anyone about the loss he had endured, but Nora's touch had given him permission to grieve, to release the pain that had been buried inside him. As the soldiers around them watched, Nora continued to offer comfort, her empathy flowing freely. The room filled with an unspoken understanding, an understanding that connected everyone, human and alien alike. In that moment, Nora realized the true power of her gift. It wasn't just about feeling emotions. It was about healing, about bringing people together through shared understanding. For the first time since she had arrived on Earth, Nora felt like she had found her purpose. She wasn't just a girl lost in a strange world. She was a bridge, a beacon of hope and healing for those around her. And as John watched from the doorway, he couldn't help but feel proud of the young girl who had brought so much light into their lives. Life at the base had settled into a quiet rhythm, but deep down, John knew that this peace wouldn't last forever. Nora had been healing, slowly but surely, and she had become a part of his life in a way he hadn't expected. But there were whispers in the air, whispers that things were about to change. One afternoon, while John was reviewing mission reports in his office, his superior, General Elizabeth Harris, entered with a serious expression. Her face was calm, but John could tell that something was off. She had been unusually quiet for the past few days, and he wondered if this was what she had been preparing him for. "John," she began, her tone formal, "we've received some communications from the Galactic Council." John raised an eyebrow. The Galactic Council was an alliance of the most powerful races in the galaxy. They had heard of Earth, but they had never interacted with humans on a deep level. The Council usually kept to themselves, ensuring that no one species dominated the galaxy. Their interest was rare, and when they did take action, it usually meant something significant was happening. "About Nora?" John asked cautiously. General Harris nodded. "Yes, they've become aware of her abilities, and they want to discuss her future. They believe she could be a valuable asset or a potential threat." John's stomach tightened. He had feared this moment. He had known that Nora's growing abilities would eventually attract attention, but he wasn't prepared for what might come next. "What do they want?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "They want her to join the council, help them with their diplomacy, and potentially use her abilities for peace negotiations across the galaxy. They believe that her ability to empathize with others could bring an end to the ongoing conflicts between certain factions." John clenched his fists. He had always known that Nora's gift would be seen as something more than just a healing power. To the Galactic Council, she wasn't a child who needed protection. She was a tool, a resource. And the thought of her being used in that way made John sick to his stomach. "I won't let them use her like that," John said firmly. "She's not a weapon, she's a person. She has a right to choose her own future." General Harris sighed and sat down across from him. "I understand your feelings, John, but you need to understand the bigger picture. The Council has the power to influence entire civilizations. If they want Nora, we won't have much say in the matter. They could force her to comply." John's mind raced. He had promised to protect Nora, and now, more than ever, he had to keep that promise. But what if the Council wasn't going to let her go? What if they took her anyway, against her will? "What are our options?" John asked, his voice steady, but filled with worry. "We'll be meeting with the Council representatives in 3 days, General Harris explained. "It's a formal meeting. We'll present Nora, and they'll decide how they want to proceed. Our goal is to make sure that whatever happens, Nora has a choice in the matter. We'll make it clear that Earth won't let her be exploited." John nodded slowly, his mind already working through the possibilities. He wasn't about to let anyone take Nora without a fight, but he also knew that the Galactic Council was a powerful force, too powerful to challenge directly. He would have to be strategic, find a way to protect Nora without making enemies of the entire galaxy. That night, as John sat in his quarters, he found Nora sitting by the window, looking out at the stars. She had become more comfortable on Earth, but John could still see the sadness in her eyes, the weight of the past that she couldn't escape. He walked over and sat down beside her. "Nora," he said softly, "there's something we need to talk about." She turned to him, her big eyes filled with curiosity. "What is it?" "The Galactic Council has heard about your abilities. They want to meet with you," John explained. "They believe you could help them bring peace to the galaxy." Nora looked away, her face full of uncertainty. "I don't want to be used like that," she said quietly. "I don't want to be a tool for them. I just want to be me." John placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "I won't let them do that to you, Nora. You're not a weapon. You're a person, and you deserve to make your own choices. Whatever happens, I'll be right here standing by your side." Nora looked at him, her expression softening. "But what if they force me to go? What if they don't let me stay here?" John took a deep breath. "Then we'll find a way to fight for you. I promise you, I won't let them take you from Earth. I won't let them take away your freedom." Nora nodded slowly, though her eyes still carried the weight of her fear. "I don't want to go back to the fighting. I don't want to be part of that galaxy anymore." "You won't have to be," John reassured her. "We'll make sure that doesn't happen." The next few days were filled with preparations. John, General Harris, and other key members of the military worked together to draft a plan for the meeting with the Galactic Council. They would need to present a strong case for why Nora should remain on Earth, away from the pressures of galactic politics. John spent every moment he could with Nora, helping her prepare mentally for the meeting. He wanted her to know that no matter what happened, she had control over her own life. The decision wasn't just about what the council wanted, it was about what she wanted. On the day of the meeting, they boarded a secure transport ship that would take them to the Galactic Council's headquarters. As the ship left Earth's atmosphere, John looked over at Nora, who was sitting quietly beside him. Her eyes were focused on the stars, but there was a quiet determination in her expression. "Nora," John said softly, "whatever happens today, remember this. You're not alone. You have a family here on Earth, and we'll do whatever it takes to protect you." Nora nodded, a small but genuine smile on her face. "Thank you, John. I believe you." As the ship sped toward the Galactic Council's headquarters, John knew that the outcome of this meeting could change everything. But one thing was certain: he would fight for Nora no matter the cost. The journey to the Galactic Council's headquarters was long, and as the days passed, the weight of the upcoming meeting grew heavier. John Carter tried to keep his focus on the present, but his mind constantly wandered back to Nora. The fear in her eyes was something he couldn't shake. She had been through so much already, and now it seemed that the galaxy was asking her to choose her future, one that she didn't even want. Nora sat beside him, looking out the window of the transport ship. The stars outside twinkled in the vast blackness of space, but she wasn't looking at them. Her mind seemed to be far away, lost in the weight of everything that had happened since she left Illyria. The familiar sense of fear lingered in her, even though John had promised to protect her. "What do you think will happen?" Nora asked softly, breaking the silence. Her voice was filled with uncertainty, and John could tell that the thought of facing the Galactic Council made her feel small and vulnerable. "I don't know," John replied honestly, "but I do know one thing. Whatever happens, I won't let them take you. You've come so far, and we'll make sure you have the freedom to choose your own future." Nora nodded, but she didn't seem convinced. "But what if they have more power than we do? What if they can force me to do something I don't want?" John reached over and took her hand. "Nora, no one can force you to do anything you don't want. We're going to stand strong together. You have a voice, and we're going to make sure it's heard." Nora looked at him, searching his face for reassurance. She had never truly been able to rely on anyone before, but she had learned to trust John in ways she never thought possible. He had always been there for her, and now she needed him more than ever. The transport ship eventually reached the Galactic Council's headquarters, a massive structure floating in the center of a distant star system. It was a towering, gleaming structure made of shimmering metal, and it seemed to pulse with an energy that reflected the power of the Council itself. As they approached, John could feel the weight of the situation settling in. The Council wasn't just a group of diplomats. They were the most powerful beings in the galaxy, capable of deciding the fate of entire civilizations. John and Nora were escorted into the heart of the Council's headquarters, where they were led into a large, high-ceilinged chamber. The room was filled with representatives from various alien species, all of them seated in high curved chairs that looked down upon the smaller platform where John and Nora stood. The air was thick with the hum of tension, and John could feel the eyes of the council members on him and Nora. There was no turning back now. At the center of the room, the Supreme Ambassador, an imposing figure with shimmering silver skin and an air of authority, rose from his seat. His voice was deep and commanding as he addressed them. "John Carter, Earth's representative, and Nora of Illyria," he began, his tone formal. "We have called you here today to discuss the future of this child. The Galactic Council believes that her abilities could play a pivotal role in the peace process across the galaxy. Her empathic power is unique, and we believe she could help resolve conflicts between warring factions." John stood tall beside Nora, his hand still resting gently on her shoulder. He knew this was going to be a fight, and he was ready. "Nora is not a tool for your peace process," John said, his voice strong and unwavering. She is a person, with her own thoughts, feelings, and desires. No one should be forced into something they don't want, no matter how powerful they are. The Supreme Ambassador's eyes narrowed slightly. You misunderstand. We do not wish to force her into anything, but we believe that her abilities could save countless lives. We offer her the opportunity to be trained and to help guide the galaxy toward a peaceful future. This is a gift, not a burden. Nora stood silently, her eyes downcast. She didn't feel like she was being offered a gift. She felt like she was being trapped in a role that she didn't ask for. She wanted to find her own way, to heal in her own time without being thrust into something bigger than herself. No. Nora finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't want this. I didn't ask for these powers. I just want to live without being used. The room fell silent, and for a moment John's heart swelled with pride. Nora was speaking her truth, and that was all he could ever want for her, to have control over her own life. But his pride quickly turned to fear as the council members exchanged glances. Some of them looked surprised, while others seemed unfazed. One of the representatives, a tall alien with dark shining skin and long graceful limbs, stood up and addressed the room. We cannot simply allow her to refuse. The galaxy is in turmoil. If we don't act now, chaos will spread further. We need Nora's abilities. John's protective instincts flared. You can't force her. She's not a tool for you to use. She's a child, and she's already been through enough. The Supreme Ambassador's expression hardened. Your opinion is noted, John Carter, but the decision has been made. Nora's abilities are too valuable for us to ignore. She will remain with the Galactic Council and fulfill her role. John felt a cold wave of shock wash over him. His worst fear was coming true. They were going to take Nora, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He looked down at Nora, who was standing quietly beside him, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and defeat. She didn't want this, but it seemed like the council wasn't giving her a choice. Just as it seemed like all hope was lost, a voice echoed through the chamber. Stop! Everyone turned to see General Harris, who had been watching the proceedings from a distance. Her voice was filled with authority, and she strode forward, unflinching in the face of the council's power. We will not let you take her, General Harris said, her eyes fierce. You will not force Nora into something she doesn't want. We will protect her with everything we have. John's heart raced as he saw the glimmer of hope return in Nora's eyes. The fight wasn't over yet. The room was tense. The Galactic Council members exchanged uncertain glances, their faces stern and unreadable. The once mighty ambassador stood motionless, but there was a shift in his demeanor. General Harris's words had changed the tone of the room. John could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone present. The council had made it clear they wanted Nora's abilities, and yet now they were being forced to reconsider their position. Nora stood beside John, her small frame tense and still. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the storm of emotions swirling within her. She had never expected to be thrust into the center of a galactic struggle. She had hoped for peace, for safety, for time to heal, but instead she was faced with the impossible, a future where her every move could be dictated by those who saw her only as a tool. I don't want this, Nora whispered, her voice small but firm. I don't want to be anyone's weapon, or a part of some grand plan. I just want to live. The silence that followed her words was heavy. John's hand rested on her shoulder, a steady presence. He knew the truth in her words, and he wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her. The council had underestimated her strength, and now they were about to see it for themselves. The Supreme Ambassador finally broke the silence, his voice softer than before. We understand your concerns, Nora, but we cannot ignore the reality of the galaxy. There are forces at play that require action. You hold the power to change everything, to bring peace where there has only been war. John stood taller, his voice unwavering. Nora doesn't need to be part of your plans for peace. She's not a tool for your political games. She's a person, and we will do whatever it takes to ensure that she has the right to choose her own future. The ambassador's eyes flickered for a moment, his calm exterior cracking ever so slightly. He seemed to weigh John's words carefully before speaking again. It is not just about peace, John Carter. It is about survival. We have seen the darkness growing in the galaxy. The tensions between factions are becoming impossible to control. The lives of billions are at stake. John's heart tightened. He understood the stakes better than anyone. The galaxy was on the edge of a precipice and peace seemed impossible. But the cost of that peace, if it meant sacrificing Nora's will and freedom, was too high. Just as the tension in the room reached its peak, a sudden, unexpected voice interrupted. "It's true," came a soft voice from the back of the room. Everyone turned to see Nora herself, standing at the edge of the platform, her face calm, but her eyes filled with determination. "I can feel the fear, the hatred, the pain in every one of you," Nora continued, her voice steady. "But that's not why I'm here. I'm not here to solve your problems. I'm here because I deserve a chance to live without being forced into something I don't want." John felt a rush of pride as he looked at Nora. She was no longer the quiet, broken girl who had arrived on Earth. She had found her voice. She had found her strength. The room fell silent again. Even the council members were struck by the power of her words. Nora's words resonated through the chamber, echoing off the walls. The very thing that they had seen as a weakness, her empathy, had now become her greatest strength. She was no longer just the girl they wanted to control. She was a force in her own right. The ambassador looked at Nora, his eyes narrowing as if trying to understand the depth of her resolve. "You are strong, Nora. I didn't realize just how strong you truly are. But even with your strength, there are forces in the galaxy that cannot be ignored." Nora shook her head. "I know about those forces, but I don't have to be a part of them. I don't want to be part of the fighting, the manipulation, the war. I just want to live." At that moment, something shifted in the room. The council members, once confident in their ability to control Nora, seemed to hesitate. They had never encountered anyone like her before, someone who could challenge their authority with nothing but pure, unyielding conviction. General Harris stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "The truth is, Nora has already made her choice. She's not going to be a pawn in anyone's game. You may have the power to manipulate others, but you can't control her. She's not just some piece to be moved across your board." The Supreme Ambassador's expression darkened, but he didn't speak. The other council members were quiet, lost in thought. They had come to this meeting with one goal in mind, using Nora to secure peace. But now, they were being forced to confront a different reality. Nora was not an asset to be used. She was a person, and her autonomy couldn't be ignored. After what felt like an eternity, the ambassador spoke again, this time with a hint of respect in his voice. "You are right. Nora," he said, his voice surprisingly calm, "we cannot force you to do something against your will. We have underestimated your resolve, and for that I apologize." John's heart raced. Was this it? Was the council finally acknowledging Nora's right to choose? "We will respect your decision," the ambassador continued. "You are free to go back to Earth, and we will not interfere with your life. But know this, the galaxy is in turmoil, and your abilities, your empathy, will be needed. Should you ever choose to help us, the offer will remain open." Nora nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a quiet strength. "Thank you. But my choice is to live my life in peace, and that is all I ask." John could hardly believe what he was hearing. The council had agreed to respect Nora's decision. It was a victory, but it was also just the beginning. The galaxy's problems were far from over, but at least for now, Nora had the chance to live her life on her terms. As they left the council's headquarters, John looked at Nora with pride. She had faced the galaxy's most powerful beings and stood her ground. She was no longer the sad, frightened girl who had arrived on Earth. She was someone who had found her own voice and claimed her freedom. And as they boarded the transport back to Earth, John knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The galaxy might be in chaos, but they had each other. And that, in the end, was all that truly mattered.